All right, this from Reddit one day ago. And so we'll get into the story, and it takes weird turns, weird twists. For instance, the guy who posted it, whoever he was or she, he reads like a man. Like when he posted it, and this will be confirmed in the thread, he posted all this stuff about what he worked on with the aliens, and his account got turned off, got banned. So he came back and did it again, got banned, and then finally the mods for the alien sub like jumped in there and like helping him stay on. They said, this is super weird. He's like, he's posting and his account is just gone. You can't message him. So then he comes back on and he says, I'm going to try and get on later, but I'm getting a lot of weird private messages. And so I think I may just call it a night. So it's pretty weird. He doesn't say where he worked, but this is Reddit. So they found it. They found where he works. See what's going on in the chat. Bye, Victoria. Napter East loves Vic. Catherine, everyone wants AJ's wife. Yeah, but you can't have it. The title, from the late 2000s to the mid 2010s, I worked as a molecular biologist for a national security contractor in a program to study exobiospheric organisms, or EBOs. I will share with you a lot of information on the subject. Feel free to ask questions or ask for clarification. So I've got some bits highlighted, if I could see, because you get super technical. And I'll try not to get too technical, because I don't understand it. Okay, from the late 2000s, mid-20s, 2010s, worked with my national security contractor program to study EBOs. The aim of the program was to elucidate, right? First paragraph, that's how he talks. The aim of the program was to elucidate the genome and proteome basis of these organisms. All right, so DNA. Since then, several breakthroughs have led to significant advances in our understanding of the genome and proteome of these beings. What we've learned so far has enabled us to outline some disconcerting perspectives about our place in this universe. Briefly, we've discovered that the EBO genome is a chimera of genomes from our biosphere and from an unknown one. So in English, a chimera is the animal that's a lot of things, right? What he's saying is they did DNA analysis on these EBOs, the aliens, and they found that their genome, their DNA, is mixed of a bunch of different creatures, and some of those are animals from here, specifically cows. And it sounds like too perfect, right? That the aliens used cows to splice in DNA because that explains cattle mutilations. That ties that up with a bow. But I read that and it's like, it's too perfect. But as you'll learn later, it makes perfect sense. And he explains technically why they use cows, in addition to some other animals, including us. So for their chimera of genomes from animals from our biosphere and from an unknown one, so from another planet. They're artificial, ephemeral, and disposable organisms created for a purpose that still partially eludes us. So spoiler alert, the aliens that they're testing and they found are clones or close to them, and they seem to be purpose-built. They're not, they're sentient, they're intelligent, but they're purpose-built to serve their purpose, and that's really it. There's not a lot of singularity with the aliens. They do what they're supposed to do, and then they die. And you'll see in their religion that that's fine. They don't mind that. Before going any further, please excuse me if you find it difficult to understand what I'm explaining. Some parts of my text are very technical. You ain't whistling Dixie. I have a PhD in molecular biology. I didn't actively seek to be part of this program. Rather, it was a stroke of luck that introduced me to one of the senior scientists. So he was at a conference doing a presentation, and it was about something not very interesting, which he admits to. It's like, it was research that wasn't going anywhere. But there was a scientist there that just liked the way he presented it and approached it. So shortly afterwards, he graduated and received a call from this person offering him a position. And at the time, everything pointed to him working in a regular lab. So he says yes, he'll take the job, doesn't really know what it is yet. He goes on to say, I did a series of three increasingly suspicious interviews, each in a different location, where my scientific background and knowledge became less and less relevant. The first was with two of the senior scientists, the second and third with people I've never seen again and who were obviously not interested in science. Sometime after the interview, I was asked to go to a fourth location where what seemed like a corporate lawyer presented me with an NDA. He made sure not only to explain every detail, but also that I understood the consequence of not respecting it. So, it sounds like intelligence, doesn't it? It sounds like military intel. Does he say where? Because I'll just tell you the lab where he's at. Oh, we'll let him get to it. The first employment weeks were by far the most memorable, although I spent most of that time in a depressing archive room. It consists mostly exclusively of reading about the subject of study and to get us up to speed. At this point, he knows, hey, you're coming in here and you're going to analyze creatures from another planet. It's like, okay, sounds interesting. There's no secret Wikipedia or even a reference book to guide us. There are only dry reports, memos, presentations, procedures, and SOPs. These documents are almost exclusively about the biology of EBOs, but there are also a few that deal with other subjects such as their food, religion, or culture. There are no documents on their technology. So we covered that a couple of weeks ago with the 4chan guy who was allegedly part of the UFO retrieval team. And his was kind of the opposite of this. His was all technology and the craft. And when people are asking him about the creatures and what they were like, he said, we don't know. Someone else did that. Someone else came in and dealt with the bodies. Well, this is who it was. As I mentioned above, the aim of the project is to gain a better understanding of the EBO genome and proteome. To achieve this, a team of around 20 scientists, 4 senior scientists, and a director was involved. The scientists, like myself, had their main responsibility to carry out the technical work. As each scientist had, to my knowledge, a PhD, we were all somewhat overqualified for what is ultimately a technician's job. The senior scientists, who make full use of their diplomas, had the task of designing the assays and had a supervisory responsibility. They were also in charge of training new employees and sometimes even came in to do technical work. The director, of course, was the person in charge who dictated priorities to the senior scientists. He was rarely on site, and the few times he was, it was to attend meetings. Other than scientific staff, there were security guards working for one subcontractor or another. There were no support staff such as janitors or maintenance workers. Scientists were responsible for this kind of work. In addition, logistical constraints ensured that every scientist is capable of carrying out any technical activity. Okay, here we go. So the laboratory itself is located in Fort Detrick, Maryland, in a building used for legitimate biomedical research. The clandestine operations are carried out in a restricted part of the basement, out of sight by regular workers. All right, so we know what that lab is now. Did I bookmark it? I did not. What was it called? Here it is. He worked for the Battelle National Biodefense Institute. He didn't say that. He gave Reddit enough information to pursue it. So if you look into this place, it's a real place. It shows up on Google Maps. MapQuest comes up. Wow. Look at the pictures. These are from like today. These pictures going up. Because no one knew this before. This was suspected though. People suspected that something was going on in here, but no one really knew for sure. I'm trying to do street view so we can get in there. Can't get in. Can't get in anywhere around. It looks like it's all blocked off. And that looks like an army town, doesn't it? All right, so that's the Battelle National Biodefense Institute. So they have a website, and it's a stock WordPress website. It's like it just oh, you guys didn't see the tab. Yeah, so there's the institute there, and people are uploading these images now. All right, so it's a stock website, WordPress, and the phone numbers don't work. And now, unfortunately or fortunately, people are starting to go out there and look. I don't recommend it. The only thing more classified or more dangerous to your safety than alien technology are alien bodies themselves. So don't go there. All right, the lab is in Fort Detrick. That's the lab. Building used for legitimate research. They work in the basement. All right, contrary to what one might imagine, the biosafety level is not maximal for this type of research. Indeed, the lab contains EBO samples or derived cell cultures is BSL-3. So that's biosafety lab levels go, they go 1 to 4, with 1 being the lowest and 4 being the highest. Unless you're in Wuhan, then it's just 1. But they go 1 to 4, and she's shaking her head down there. So 1 is like basically wash your hands. 2 is maybe wear a mask and gloves. If you're handling something super toxic, put that in a box, but otherwise it's not super crazy. And then 3, we get into wearing masks and maybe full suits. And then 4, that's biosafety level 4 is you take a shower in, shower out, change your clothes, like that whole thing. So he's saying that, yeah, we've got cell cultures at biosafety 3, but the lab and everything are just BSL-2. So that's lab coats. But the biosafety level 3 area of the facility includes a freezer room and a cell culture lab, and is only accessible through an antechamber from the biosafety level lab level 2 section. EBO carcasses are preserved in horizontal freezers at a temperature of -80 degrees Celsius. To maximize the preservation of these carcasses, they are preserved in vacuum bags, and the air in the room is controlled to minimize humidity. There are only 4 bodies, and none of them are complete. It's obvious that these creatures have died as a result of major trauma. Yeah, I mean, spaceship crash is going to do that. I've never witnessed a motorcycle accident fatality, but it probably looks similar to this. I've seen motorcycle accidents, pretty messy. It is acknowledged that there are more EBOs carcasses at other locations. Sure. The cell culture laboratory, as its name suggests, is where the cell lines derived from the EBOs are grown and related activities are performed. I'll talk in more detail about these specific cell lines later on. Yes, they're growing them. This BSL-2 part is mainly used for assays, immunohistochemistry, genetic engineering, immunocytochemistry. Those are that's antigen testing. They're testing antigens and, yeah, antiviruses, I guess, to see how sick they can get them. I don't know, but that's antigen testing. There's also a cell culture lab, but this is used for more traditional cell lines. Other than the labs, there are all the amenities you can find in an office. Note that the internet access is limited to senior staff and up. There is, however, an intranet for bioinformatics needs. Okay, so this is 10 years ago. On the subject of the biology of these beings, I'll start by discussing genetics, then their gross anatomy, and finally their biological systems. For the sake of clarity, the information that I provide here is an aggregation of what I observed and what I have read. I will make many comparisons with human anatomy because it is the most logical reference. I'm just checking the chat. Don M, growing aliens. They're growing them. They're growing these aliens. And more and more. They're doing more than growing them. Light Ray Fuse says fictional story. Could be. But this one so far is checking out. And the Reddit mod says, look, we can't confirm any of this. We can't confirm his account. We can't confirm where he worked. Obviously, you can't. So take it all with a grain of salt. That said, it's an interesting story. And if you're into the technology and the science of this, it's a good read. Aaron Davis, they're like bio drones. You don't know how close you are, man. Matt Cooper says lizard people. They're not, but we're going to get to those later. Canadian Mage, what's with the black cube, AJ? I don't know. Where? Is there a black cube somewhere? Maybe this? SRG, Richard Doty lives. So I'll get some more light in here for you. Come on. Is that better? Does that get rid of the black cube? Say, Booth, love linking that 5-MeO EMT. That's 5-MeO DMT, and be careful with that stuff, my friend. Heather B loves the glasses. It's become like a thing, like a trademark of the show, but they're really just Amazon glasses to cut the harsh light and let me see and let me read. I wouldn't be able to do this at all like this. This would be the show. Just a pink receding hairline. That would be the show. All right, their genetics are like ours, based on DNA. And this fact was very puzzling for me when I first learned about it. We imagined that beings from an alternate biosphere would have genetics based on a completely foreign biochemical system. And surprisingly, this is not the case. Several conclusions can be drawn from this surprising revelation. The one that immediately comes to mind is that our biosphere and theirs share a common ancestry. So he is talking about, and he'll get to it later, but he'll get to it in his jargony gobbledygook. But he's talking about panspermia. Pan meaning all, meaning every, spermia meaning seed. So that the DNA is out there in our universe and our whatever it is, lands here, and then we evolve. And that's why these intelligent, sentient races like humans and OB and the EBOs are so similar. You know, bipeds, large brains, opposable thumbs. Fizzgig, still a lot of hair for your age, AJ. That's what you call, that's a backhanded compliment. That's what that is. I'm seeing Jen's face. She's like, she's doing this. You look really good for your age. Thanks. You sound really smart for your avatar. What do you think about that? What do you think about that, huh? All right, so he's talking about panspermia, that it all came from everywhere. All right, so their cells have nuclei containing genetic material like ours, which suggests that their biosphere would have been separated from ours sometime after the appearance of this type of organism. The term exobiospheric organism is actually a misnomer, but as it's a historical term, it's still used. Their genetics are not only based on the same genetic system, but they're also even compatible with their own cellular machinery. That means you can take a human gene and insert it into an EBO cell, and that gene will be translated into protein. And this, of course, works in reverse with a human gene inserted into an EBO cell. What could possibly go wrong? So our species are genetically compatible. And they're saying you could put the cells in different human and alien, alien and human, and it works. How do you know that? Because they did it. Because got to give it a try. Well, you know, they couldn't get the alien fetus to take though, so the embryo wouldn't take. So thank God for small favors. There are important differences in post-translational modifications that will make the final protein non-functional, but I'll discuss these later. Their genome consists of 16 circular chromosomes. 16 circular chromosomes, so way fewer than we have. right? What do we have? 42? What do we have? 46, 23 pairs. I'm looking at the chat. 46, right? 23 pairs. All right. So they're way fewer, but you'll see why. You're probably familiar with the concept of intergenic region. I mean, who isn't? I mean, that's dinner conversation for me, intergenic region. Honey, you want to talk about intergenic regions tonight? We'll go into 134 base pairs. What are you in the mood for? And she's like, you're just too sexy. Called junk DNA. So these are basically DNA sequences that don't code for proteins. These are evolutionary residues, transposons, and activated genes, and so on. To give you an idea, in humans, intergenic regions represent approximately 99% of our genome. I'm aware that these sequences aren't completely useless. They can be used as histone anchors, as buffers to protect coding DNA from radiation, or even as alternative open reading frames, but that's rather peripheral. All right. So junk DNA is, all right, so we've got this DNA in our genes, right? We got the stuff in there, and we don't use all of it. So forever, the scientists didn't know what the DNA was there for. They thought maybe it was left over. They weren't sure. So they just called it junk DNA. It's just there. There's a lot of it, though. But more recently, we're finding out that it does have purposes. And he describes a couple, like protecting against radiation. You know, that's some severe programming. All right. Speaking of genetic engineering, now he just goes into the crazy stuff here. Base pairs, 5' 3' order, 5' TPR, 12 base pair spacers, chromosomal address, 12 base pair spacers, gene address, 12 base pair spacers, 3' TPRs. I'm getting there. The chromosomal address is composed of 4 base pairs and is identical in each TPR of the same chromosome. That's a tri pair. I'd have to look it up. It's a weird thing. TPRs are the same chromosome, but distinct between each of the 16 chromosomes of the genome. The gene address is a 64 base pair sequence that is unique for each gene with a whole genome. It's therefore understandable that the TPR serves as a unique address, not only for numerically identifying a gene, but also identifying its chromosomal location. For those with only basic knowledge, for those with only a basic knowledge of genetics, this is completely unheard of. So there is an order to their genetics. It's almost like genes with IP addresses, where it's like, hey, I'm looking for this gene. Oh, that's in this location. Well, they all have it. It's there. That's the number. So, of course, this is completely unheard of. No living thing in our biosphere has this kind of precise address in its genome. Once again, the presence of TPR cannot be explained by evolutionary pressure, but only by genetic engineering on a genomic scale. So these aliens, they're not, it's not alien is a chip off the old block junior. He's born. He's he's an alien baby in a crib. Well, I don't know what alien baby would have in the mobile. I guess you wouldn't have UFOs. And he's raised, he goes to alien kindergarten and alien high school, and he gets an alien marriage, an alien divorce, alien middle. It's none of that. This is genetic engineering. These beings are not born, they're built. Even if they're born, they're not, it's not a genetic mix. They're born with a purpose. So TPR opens the door to several possibilities. One of them suggests that ebiogeneticists can insert or remove a gene from a cell in a way that is far more targeted and efficient than our technology allows. The nature of these tools is unclear, but we definitely don't have anything like it. Then he goes on some technical stuff. In other words, an individual could be genetically designed to have characteristics that give it an advantage in performing a given task, like soldier ants and worker ants in an anthill. Note that these previous statements are speculation. To my knowledge, only one individual genome has been sequenced. I can't make a definitive statement on genetic variation between individuals. So you remember the whistleblower from a few weeks ago from 4chan? And look, I know it's 4chan, but it was a fun read. Remember how he said that the UFOs coming from the large craft in the Bermuda Triangle, those are purpose-built. So they have a metal forge down there, raw materials, and someone decides, he speculated it could be AI, something decides that we want to do a survey of the Black Pyramid in Alaska. You guys want a story about the Black Pyramid in Alaska? That's a good one. So we want to scan the Black Pyramid of Alaska. So the AI gets the raw materials and it builds the equipment it needs: scanners, navigation, communications, just the machines, and then it puts the UFO skin on it. And he says that's why the UFOs are different sizes and kind of different shapes, because it's just based on what equipment's inside. So the UFO is built for that purpose. It shoots out to Alaska, it does its thing, gets the data, comes back, gets disassembled, and back to raw materials. Oh, I'm sorry.
Isn't it amazing what passes for a live stream these days? Boy, oh boy.
That's rude. So that's what's happening with the craft. He's explaining that that's what happens with the beings. You know, soldier ants, worker ants. So that's what they're seeing. And he's saying it's speculation, but that they don't know for sure that's what it is. But if you were going to do that, if you were going to genetically modify beings for purposes, this is how you would do it. So if you're creating soldiers, you want to make them stronger, make them faster, you know, quicker reflexes. You're making scientists, they're going to be more focused on smart. Clearly, I'm not a scientist. So you could do that. There are many genes, talking about the aliens, analogous to ours, which is not surprising given the compatibility of our cellular machinery. What's disturbing is that some genes correspond directly, nucleotide by nucleotide, with known human genes or even some animal genes. So human DNA and animal DNA are in the aliens. For these genes, there doesn't seem to be any artificial refinement, but rather a crude copying and pasting. Why they do it is nebulous and still subject to conjecture. There are also many genes which are not found in our biosphere, whose role has not been identified. Finding the purpose of these novel genes is one of the aims of the program. I'd like to note that before going any further, that this heterogeneity of genes of known and unknown origin is an undeniable proof of the artificiality of EBOs. So they're building these creatures with alien DNA, human DNA, and animal DNA. Well, why are they doing that? He kind of gets to it, but I'll sum up. It is too much. I will sum up. They're infusing the beings with human and animal DNA to make them more compatible with our biosphere, because the way that they're made up, their genetics are similar and compatible with ours. That's fine, but that's genetics. There's so much more to a creature, right? I mean, how different is our DNA from a frog, right? It's not that different, but it's a very different organism. So our DNA is very similar to theirs, but it's a very different organism. You know, when we get into how their body is built, it's crazy. But you can see why they're not compatible with Earth. You know, this would be toxic. They can't eat anything here. If it's a completely different biome, everything would be toxic. If you got on a ship, right, and traveled to another world, where would you go? Zeta Reticuli? You'd go to planet Serpo, right? See if that's true. If you went to planet Serpo, everything would kill you because the biome is not compatible. But if you were genetically resequenced with DNA of that biome, you could perhaps, if you were advanced enough, create an organism that could tolerate it. You'd still be you, but we just put a little bit of a little bit squirt of the grays into you, so that when you go to Serpo, you're fine. You're sick, You don't, it's not comfortable. You'd still need a suit and all kinds of stuff, but it won't kill you. And I'm not making a joke. That's why they do it. Because all this stuff is toxic. This is just a way to minimize the toxicity and maximize the compatibility with our biome, with our biosphere. All right, this is kind of technical. Let me see if I can just blast through it. I briefly introduced the differences in post-translational modifications between human and EBO. This is hardly a surprise, as we often see the same thing between different terrestrial species. Obtaining a viable protein from a DNA sequence is a complex process involving hundreds of protein intermediates, each with a precise and essential role. A minor variation in the assembly line can lead to functional irregularities in the final product. So it's no surprise that there are setbacks along the way when the first EBO gene transfection attempts fail to produce the desired functional protein in human cell lines. All right, so they're trying to splice and it's not working. That's what he's saying. And they weren't surprised by it, because that's not surprising. So about the proteins, everyone remembers the DNA proteins, right? The A, the T, the C, and the G. The alien proteins are the same exact proteins. So that's why it works. Okay, so they're trying to get these genetics spliced together. They're trying to, I don't know what they're trying to build, but they're trying to make it work. And it's not working. So for your information, we use a biological ballistics delivery system, aka a gene gun, for our transfection needs, because other methods are not very effective with cells of this line. Okay, so they're trying to get the DNA between the species to communicate. It's not working out. The proteins, it won't take. Attempts fail. So they analyze the genome of the aliens a little bit more, and they find that there is a good amount of cow DNA in their sequence, Earth cow DNA. So they expose the cells to fetal bovine serum. Fetal bovine serum. And it works. And the cells enter a phase of exponential growth when exposed to fetal bovine serum. So that's why the cows. That's the genetics portion. Next is gross anatomy. We'll get to how they're built. James, how'd you get this information? This is off Reddit. Just posted just yesterday. Splice was a trippy movie. Yeah, it was. Melissa Rodriguez, the serum is used to feed the cell cultures. First, last, the aliens fart as much as the cows. They don't. And we're going to get into their waste system. We're going to talk anuses and rectums. We're going to talk excrement. We're going to get into it. Justin Washburn, got to have several stomachs. Brandon Thomas, so are we getting an episode on this? If you want, if I can figure out what story we'd tell here, because this is just a guy telling a story. This could all be 100% real. And, I lean toward it is, but I've become a lot less skeptical very recently. We'll do a quick sidebar before we get into gross anatomy. I think it's kind of, he gets kind of graphic with how they're built, sexual organs and stuff. I'm going to tell you what he says, but he's purely academic. So I think we're fine for kids. I just, I don't want to, I'm going to have to say anus a bunch of times. So just a quick side thing. So all this stuff's going on with the with Grush, the whistleblower, talking about the retrieval program, the Air Force guy, the whistleblower. You know who I'm talking about. We covered his interview a couple of weeks back. Who I was skeptical of, and I'm still skeptical of. When I look at him, I'm like, I don't buy it. But Congress has reviewed his documentation. They find it to be pretty credible enough that investigations and hearings are warranted. And so that's pretty crazy. Other whistleblowers have come up as well. I believe there are 6 people now in the mix corroborating his story, but I don't think any of them want their names out. So I think that's what it is. My point is, it's looking like there might be alien bodies in spacecraft, like for real. So I'm just doing my thing, this past week or so, and I find a news program. It's a typical news. It's like the two anchors, the woman and the man. They're kind of airheady, and they're talking to the reporter on the screen. It's the same thing you always see. So the lady anchor, female anchoress, she says, all right, we're going to go now to our guy who's been investigating the David Grush interview, and he's been researching the alien stuff for a couple of years, and we're going to go to him, and he's on the screen. And it's fine. So this guy's saying, all right, I've looked through his documentation, Congress, I've looked through all that. Everything checks out. The corroborating witnesses, it all checks out. And the lady anchor, she's doing what they all do. Like when news people talk about aliens and stuff, can't you just see they're just like giggly and like it's a fluff segment. Oh, UFOs are real. Let's go talk to our UFO guy. Here's George Knapp with another wacky story. That's what they always do. So that was her attitude with him. So he's being kind of serious. He's going playing along. He's personable, but this is serious to him. So he tells her, he says, look, I've been researching this for 4 or 5 years. And only now can I get people to talk to me. And he says, hang on, screensaver. He says he all the years doing his investigation, he was skeptical about it. He was doing it because to him, the story was a government cover-up, and why are there whistleblowers? He was trying to find that out. He didn't really care about UFOs or crafts. He wanted to know, why is the government covering something up? Because a lot of people saying there are. So what is it? What's going on? So skeptical. But he's talking to her, and his attitude, his mood, his tone changes. And they're back and forth, and he just goes like this, like he's like rubbing his head. He's uncomfortable, and he says, all right, so I understand why they cover this up. He says, I get it now. And she's like, what? He says, I understand why I cover it up. She's like, well, I thought you weren't, the government should tell everybody. He's like, I don't know. I don't know if that's true anymore. So I understand. I get it now, why they cover it up. And she starts to get like, this conversation's changing now. She's like, what are you talking about? He said, now that I believe this is real. And he says, I do. I believe these stories. I've seen the documentation. I've talked to the people. This is a real thing. Our government and perhaps other governments have craft from other planets in the universe and beings that came on spaceships here. She's like, yeah, that's what UFOs and aliens are. He said, and it's different now. It was always abstract. It was always just a fun conspiracy story. I'm paraphrasing a little bit for him, but it was always abstract. He says, now that I know it's real, it's making me kind of question everything, our place in the universe, like what all this is. He says, I'm one step away from an actual crisis moment. He said, I'm having trouble processing this. It's weighing on me. It's stressing me out. I'm having trouble sleeping. It's hard there's no one to talk to. And she's like, this is, you could see in her face that she's like, all right, we're going to have to go to commercial. And when I watched him and I saw his face, I started to feel it. I started to feel the same thing, because UFOs and aliens is fun. To me, it's fun. I like the cover-ups. I like the idea. I like the idea of a secret government, a shadowy government with its own military and its secrets and men in black. That's romantic to me. But once it starts to become a real thing, it becomes very sinister. course, I always tell the story that it's sinister because it is. But once it becomes an actual real thing, that when you think that right now at this moment, there are people working, they go in, they punch a clock, and their job is to go and intimidate witnesses, and their job is to go and do gene splicing with alien DNA, or their job is to go and try to reverse engineer a craft that came from another planet somehow. That it becomes when it starts to become real, then it becomes very difficult to process. I don't know if you're the same way. If you're not, then you may not have accepted it yet either. You might still be where I was, which is, I want to know. The truth is out there. I want to know. But then once it starts to become real, then it becomes it's almost a crisis of existence. I'm just reading the chat. Tom wants to know the aliens' view on God. Yeah, they have one. Sazo one up says aliens anus. We need the truth. We're gonna get it. I got you anus. I got you anus right here. All right, the gross anatomy of the aliens. They are morphologically very similar to the gray aliens that are part of modern folklore. Their height is about 150 centimeters. For 4'11", 5 feet. So 5 feet. They have 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. Still, there are some notable differences. Skin. The gray skin that is often described in folklore is, in fact, a biosynthetic film, which likely serves to protect the EBO from a hostile environment. I ate the Diet Cookie too fast. It doesn't provide effective protection against temperature changes, but it does offer adequate protection against the passage of liquids. Under the gray film, the epidermis, you can just say skin. Under the gray film, the skin is rather white, and the texture is very regular and without any hair. We do not see any defect other than the folds near the joints. It's described as greasy in one report. You remember the Virginia incident, the story? Just keep that in your mind as we go through this. Virginia incident, the quick recap, the ship crashes in Brazil, in Virginia, and the aliens get loose. What happened? I don't know what happened. The aliens get loose, and they're seen by a couple of people. They're described as having dark skin that looks very greasy. They're described as having the most foul smell of ammonia, so much so that people were getting sick from it. They couldn't get the smell out of their throat for days. They couldn't get it out of the hospital. And when that one soldier captured the alien, he got sick and died. So that's Virginia incident. Remember that. Their skin is described as greasy in one report, but that's not something I've observed. The same report states that a strong lingering smell of burnt hair and ammonia is present when the film is removed. There are a lot of pores on the skin, crossing from the epidermis to a gland in the hypodermis. These glands and pores are the terminal part of the excretory sudoriferous system, which could only explain the previously mentioned smell. Excretory sudoriferous is waste and sweat. Waste and sweat. That's their skin. Head. The head contains 2 large, oversized eyes, 2 nostrils without protuberance. This is how he talks. It sticks out. Without protuberance, a narrow mouth without lips, and 2 ear canals without auricles. There is a mandible, but the musculature is vestigial. So the jawbone is there. The jaw muscles are there, but they're not really used. There are no teeth or tongue in the oral cavity. That was weird to me. No teeth or tongue, just a hole. Just lips and a hole. Stay focused. There appears to be no equivalent to the olfactory bulb in the nasal cavity. The mouth leads directly to the esophagus and the nasal cavity to the trachea. The trachea and esophagus do not communicate. So we've got two different pipes. You know, your trachea and esophagus, they communicate, right? You swallow, it goes down esophagus, breathe, trachea. Something goes down the wrong pipe, that's what that is. You aspirate water, that's what that is. I know you know that, but I'm looking at some of those usernames on here, and there's definitely people who don't know that. But Paul Wright, Josh MC, you're good. DSDRN, she's smart. Photo Fox, Robin Hood. You know who you are. All right, that's the head. Now we have the eyes. The eyes are weird. Like the skin, the eyes are covered with a semi-transparent biosynthetic film that offers the same environmental protection, while providing protection against certain wavelengths and light intensity. When the film is removed, a more traditional eye is revealed. It's about 3 times larger than a human eye, and there are no eyelids. The size of their eyes suggests they have excellent night vision. It seems paradoxical to cover them with a semi-opaque film. Perhaps they only need to wear it in a bright environment. Their sclera, so the white, is the same color as their skin. The iris is pale gray, and the pupil is black and oversized. The lens is rounder than a human, and the musculature used to adjust focus is more developed. On the retina, there are at least 6 types of cone cells. The responsiveness of each of these 6 types of cone is specific to a wavelength band with a minimum overlap between each other. The result is a broader visible spectrum. Not just broader. If you've got 6 different types of cone cells, I mean, you could practically see into the future with that. You can see infrared, ultraviolet. You could see all kinds of stuff. You could probably see through walls. You can't see through walls. I'm just saying that's some intense eyes. But it's very strange to me to read that, to hear that they have very, very good vision, very good hearing, no eyelids. Seems strange. But the big black that we see, that's kind of that's the covering. That's the biosynthetic film. There's an eye under there. There's an eyeball and a pupil underneath that big black thing that we always see. That's extra creepy to me. To like just the gray alien, but he's got human looking big eyes. I don't care for that. I'm going to pop that into the AI later. We'll see what Midjourney does with that info. All right, so the ear, not much here. As mentioned, the outer ear has no auricle, and the ear canal is unremarkable. The inner ear has all the characteristics of a typical vestibular and cochlear system. I'm sorry, this is how he talks. Although the curvature of the cochlea is more pronounced than a human, this probably results in greater hearing acuity for low frequencies. All right, so that's just the bones in there. Bones in the ear. The brain is weird. The brain is tetraspheric, and our brains are hemispheric. So this is 4, comprised of 4 major sections. The sections are separated by transverse and longitudinal fissures and are connected to the central lobe, which acts as brainstem and cerebellum. That's strange to me. Brainstem cerebellum would be the base of our skull, right? Controlling motor functions, the low-level stuff, like operating system. But there's those processes are handled in the central lobe. So we're seeing physiology that's very different now. The volume of the brain is around 20% superior to that of a man of the same height. It has a much more pronounced level of gyration, so that's ridges and bumps, convolutions, than an average human. Moreover, the ratio of glial cells to neurons is also slightly higher than in humans. It's important to mention the presence of nodules on the central lobe. Histological analysis of these structures reveals a kind of intricate biological circuitry. It's speculated that these nodules are essential to interact with their technology. Consequently, determining the proteome of these structures is an absolute priority for the program. So that also tracks. So the brains they're like humans, they're twice as advanced and a little bit bigger. So much more advanced, a little bit bigger. It looks like the deep control, the motor functions has been moved into the central lobe. So I don't know, maybe that evolves out. I don't know where we stand on this. Is this a different species, or is this, if we all come from the same source, panspermia, do we all end up the same way? Is this what humans become? Do we eventually lose our eyelids and our teeth. I had a couple of jokes there, but it's not appropriate. So we hear a lot about how when they're finding craft, there's not a lot of controls. It seems to be that the pilots touch the panel, right, with their paws, whatever those mitts are, and they communicate with the craft. People thought telepathically, but it doesn't seem to. It seems to be a tactile. They put their hands or whatever those are, put their hands in the surface of the whatever that is, dashboard, control panel, and somehow through maybe the nerves, information is transmitted and through their central nervous system into the brain and received by these nodules, because they histological analysis. So they're saying this looks like biological circuitry that they think that is there to interact with technology. And this is 10 years ago. So that tracks. The folklore has been around for so long that it's almost easy to write a story that tracks because you have so much information. It's almost like we know what they look like. You could tell a story about the craft was crashed and it was silver and had no seams and I felt an electrical field, and we went inside and it was very sparse, but there was a control panel and they put the hand, but there was no other buttons on it, and on and on and on. Because we all know the stories already. But it's interesting to see this very, very medical scientific approach to this, where he's not really talking about crafts or anything like that. He's talking about the science and the physiology of the aliens, and it just happens to line right up with the lore. So the neck is proportionally longer than that of a human and at the same time relatively thin. As mentioned, the esophagus and trachea are separate. There are no vocal cords in this region. The thorax. The musculature of the thorax is underdeveloped. Muscles equivalent to the pectoralis major chest. We can also see the trapezius and deltoid shoulders, as well as defined. The ribs and sternum are clearly visible. There are no nipples. So that's not as fun, but they don't need those. Abdomen. The abdomen is wider than the thorax and bulges slightly forward. There is no navel. If they're growing these beings, why do you need a navel? The pelvic bones are apparent, and this is going to be very disappointing to Charlie A, to Zozo for sure, and Fizzgig is not going to like this, but there are no genitals or anus. So, no wild weekend. Adam Whiteside, the aliens got beer bellies. Yeah, that's what he's describing. But that we see them kind of pear-shaped, right? Someone asking who wrote this. This is a biochemist who says he worked for about 10 years at a military facility, and a lot of his information is tracking out. Nipples aren't needed either, Duke Lake says. That's true. If you're growing them, I guess you don't need those. See, my instinct says they're there for fun, but they really are. They're there for feeding. I forgot. All right. Pelvis, hands and feet. Their hands have 4 digits, including an opposable thumb on the medial side. They have no nails, and the texture of their fingerprints is composed of concentric circles. Fingers are proportionally much longer than humans. Unlike humans, finger musculature is entirely intrinsic to the hand. In other words, the muscles used to move the fingers are not in the forearms, but are located in the hands. At first glance, the feet consist of just 2 digits, but necropsy soon determined that each toe was made of 2 fused digits. The medial toe is marginally longer than the distal toe. The feet are relatively longer and narrower than a human. Their musculature, however, is vestigial. So, these are not very physically active species, but I guess they just need brains and spaceships. Treaty Efroy says, this is amazing. I thought so too when I read this. You know, I didn't know how much you'd like it. But, you know, we on the live stream, we got 4 hours to kill. Bob Loblaw says they sound like gamers. Just beer bellies and no defined musculature. No offense if you're a gamer. I'm a gamer and I still try to keep it fit. John Richards, yeah, we totally created them. I don't think so. Rogue RR wonders if they have pets. They do. Look in the mirror. The EBO's endoskeleton is very similar to ours, at least in terms of composition. There's collagen, hydroxyapatite, which I think is calcium, but also copper oxide crystals where marrow would normally be found. The role of the crystals has not been established. Copper oxide crystals. Copper comes up a lot with their physiology. So the bones kind of look and feel like ours, but no marrow. Copper oxide crystals, which makes you think that maybe on the planet where they're from is a very different atmosphere, very different chemical makeup than ours. Because copper is toxic to us. You know, that's a super heavy metal. We can't have too much copper. Sean Smith says it's the Anunnaki. Katsu says, so how do we know it's not just a Reddit fairy tale? We know. We don't. It's, you know, it's as far as, you know, I read a lot of these, but I don't bring up many of them because you get halfway through and you're like, LARPing, hoax. This one is very, very strong. And I just thought it was very well done, very interesting. And I like how focused he is. It's just medical stuff. It's just very technical stuff. He's not trying to weave a tale. Because look, even the 4chan guy, who I thought sounded pretty good, there was still kind of this sci-fi feel to it, right? You know, the craft and the ocean and they're custom built and all that. It had a sci-fi feel to it. This guy doesn't read sci-fi to me. This reads like a scientist who knows his stuff and is looking at things that I'd never seen anything like this. And is just reporting it. He's not, I don't feel like he's taking a stand. He's not trying to convince us of anything. The reason he says that he's doing this is that he feels like people have a right to know. And he feels like there is a little bit of a disclosure happening. And now would be an opportune time to do this. And he might be right. But we can't ask him because his account was banned and then deleted and nobody knows who he is. Reed McKnight, no eyelids, no sleep. That's interesting. It was part of one of Doty's stories that a couple of other people said is that they don't sleep, they rest. They just rest. They put their brains like they wind it down. Sean Smith, copper oxide for conductance. That's interesting. You know, more biotech. Acacia, how can we be sure this wasn't OpenAI or ChatGPT generated? You should run this through one of those plagiarism checkers. I'm super curious now. That's a good idea. I'll do that later. But I don't think so. I don't think so. It reads a little bit more. It reads more like a guy. You know, like this is how someone speaks. This kind of language. You know, he can't use a one syllable word. Is monosyllabic? Is that the right thing? He can't keep it simple. He has to say epidermis. He can't just say skin for us. Johnny Scythe says giveaway time. I'm looking down at Jen. Do you want to do a giveaway? We'll get back to the
Let's do it.
But the thing is, after second giveaway, then we usually do Gino's story hour. Right?
Well, I'm ready for story hour, but we got 17,000 people
17,000 people
that are interested in what we're talking about.
So we do Gino's story hour, which is a 10-minute story followed by a 5-minute conversation. And then we can get back into the alien physiology. We're about up to the biological system. So we're going to get into, after the giveaway, and story hour. So give us like 15, 20 minutes. We're going to get into the respiratory system, the circulatory system, the blood, the excreto-sudoriferous system. So we'll talk about how they get rid of their waste, which actually is super interesting. The way they get rid of waste. This is one of the little clues to me that makes this sound very legit. Is he describes the way the aliens get rid of their waste, and you read it and you're like, genius. Why don't we do it that way? The way we do it is weird. The way we do it is weird, and it takes up time. Doesn't it? I'm looking at you, Jennifer. Sometimes it takes up a lot of time for you.
What?
Okay, that's enough.
That's enough. You're so rude.
That's enough. We're not going to talk about your bathroom habits now, are we?